as humans and as individuals, there's no way we're going to outsmart the planet. So there's no way we're going to outsmart the planet. There are bigger forces out there which will take their course. So in that same way, even if we're in a tricky position, we can find ways out of that tricky position to bring hope and to bring some optimism and hopefully to rectify certain things. As a musician, that's what I would say I'm fundamentally, is to then go and find out where these things are and then to try and bring them to people to say, oh, well, look, here's a bunch of Lewisham residents who say the refrain is, do we really care? Yeah. Do we really care? Yeah, because we'll fight for our air. So people in Lewisham do care about the quality of the air that they're breathing in all of the time. So that was one thing to say, okay, I'm providing a frame which is a music video and a song, as opposed to saying, leave your job, leave everything, your family, go stand in line, sign a petition, go to your counsellors who might not necessarily listen. Whereas if they see a music video and you can see there's black people, there's South Asian people, there's Southeast Asian people, there's East Asian people, there's all of these, there's Turkish people, there's European people, there's British people, there's all of these different people in the community saying, actually, we do care about this issue.
You're listening to the Spaceship Earth podcast with me, Dan Burgess. The story of Spaceship Earth is simple. We live on a life-giving rock called Earth, hurtling through space. Like a spaceship, we have a finite amount of supplies with an intelligent operating system called nature, which keeps everything replenished as long as we all respect it and participate wisely. So a deep relationship with this mysterious system, along with spontaneous cooperation between humans and all life, is essential to keep us thriving and the spaceship flying. In this podcast, I'm in conversation with folk involved in regenerating life, shifting consciousness and reimagining how we can live more beautifully and peacefully. I talk with artists, writers, activists, designers, adventurers, healers, farmers, creative mavericks, and more. Their stories invite us to participate in the co-creation of life-sustaining cultures, in service to life, becoming crew on Spaceship Earth. Hello, welcome to the podcast. This is Dan. Lovely of you to tune in, and I hope this finds you calm. I think calm is an all right place to be in these times. So I hope this finds you calm. In this episode, I am in conversation with Love Ssega. Now, Ssega is a performing music artist and, well, he's a multidisciplinary artist from South London. His music-led work has been performed at London's National Gallery, at the Serpentine Pavilion. He's had visual art exhibited at New York's MoMA. His use of art and culture to promote climate awareness saw him invited to host at the UN's COP26 and feature at the New York Times Climate Forward. And here's a fact, Love Ssega was the original frontman-songwriter of Grammy-winning Clean Bandit. And he's now artist in residence for Royal Festival Hall's Philharmonia Orchestra. He's a trustee of Brian Eno-led climate music charity Earth Percent, who we've talked about quite a bit on this podcast, and Arts Foundation Music for Change Fellow 2022. Ssega is weaving extraordinary magic through his actions and work. He's exploring climate justice, social justice, air pollution, social housing, so much more through this kind of weave, this blend of music, performance, collaboration, co-creation with communities, with galleries, with poets, with orchestras, and so much more. He's bringing voices and people into the mix through his art who often are those who've been most marginalised and are suffering the most from the structures and systems of modernity. We explored the question, what does it mean to be an artist, a musician, in a time of planetary crises? and we journeyed through some of his amazing projects and riffed on many threads. Ssega is an incredible human. His energy, creativity, and humility is awesome, and I love chatting to him. So check out Ssega's music and projects. You'll be delighted that you did. I really hope you enjoy this episode. This is the Spaceship Earth podcast with Love Ssega.
You're listening to the Spaceship Earth podcast with my dad, Dan Burgess.
Ssega, welcome to the Spaceship Earth podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Good to be here. Good to be here in person as well.
Yeah, which is fantastic.
In the big smoke, which I haven't been up to for a while.
Yeah.
This is your manor. Not exactly here.
Yeah, not here. I'm on the other side.
Yeah.
But it's a big place.
It is, mate. It is.
I wish I'd escape to the country like you. That would be my dream. Yeah.
I know. I was a North London lad for a long time. I was up in Haringey for years.
Yep.
How are you arriving today? Like, how are things for you in this moment?
I think at this moment in time, things are exciting. I think that's the main thing. It's exciting. And I hate it when people say they're busy, but things are busy. There are lots of things, which is exciting because it shows people are paying attention. And then also, especially now, before when I was just doing pop music, just performing by myself and with my band, that's a very solo, selfish, very, indulgent thing, which I did love. I really did love. But then now if I'm doing work where I'm collaborating with more people, then you can see the bigger opportunities I get, the bigger the platforms and the more opportunities there are to take other people into these spaces. And that's the really exciting thing. So that's the cool thing on that side. And then on the other side, there's a lot of work we sort of need to do. And it's the realization of that. And fortunately for myself, I'm not really the sort of person to get too bogged down. I think a lot of people, they say, I can't imagine you angry. And I'm like, ask my mum. So I think but luckily I don't get sort of depressed or depressive because there's always another way. And then I also believe that as humans and as individuals, there's no way we're going to outsmart the planet. So there's no way we're going to outsmart the planet. There are bigger forces out there which will take their course. So in a way, in that same way, even if we're in a tricky position, we can find ways out of that tricky position to bring hope and to bring some optimism and hopefully to rectify certain things.
Yeah, gosh. Well, we're gonna dive into a lot of this, which is gonna be great.
Started off light, didn't I?
No. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. And I love that because I think it's this weaving between the kind of micro, like what's happening with us in our lives right in front of us, and then this sort of zooming out to like we're part of this bigger story that's, or whatever you want to call it. It's this happening that's unfolding, and so it's sort of dancing between these different levels of I guess a different view or different experience of what is actually might be happening. But there's a lot I'd love to sort of explore with you, and I guess maybe there's a question that that might sort of frame a little bit of this hour we've got together, and we're probably going to need to go back. Well, you're going to probably need to go back to start us off on this, but I'm really you're someone who is an artist. You've got lots of different disciplines, I think, from music to performance, all kinds of work, which we'll get into. But what I see is hopefully not rare anymore. I hope we see sort of artists everywhere piling in. But you have entangled your work with all these other dimensions of these big issues that we're seeing around us, whether it's climate breakdown, whether it's social justice, all these intersectional links that I know are a part of your work. And what I'm really fascinated in these times is more and more people are kind of stepping in to this complexity and not moving away from the uncomfortable, difficult problems that we're in, but sort of weaving their own gift into that space. And and so I'm really, and this is what we explore a lot on this podcast is what is it for people to, what is it even to be a profession in these times? We had a chat, didn't we, before the start about a mutual friend, Paul Powsland, who's, well, by the time this comes out, it would have been the last episode. But as him as a lawyer, sort of like, it's a question that he explores. What does it actually mean to be a lawyer in a time of climate and ecological breakdown, for example? And that to me seems something that is very alive for you, and it must be because of the direction that you're traveling in. So I wondered if we could maybe sort of have that in our heads as we're sort of navigating this hour, but also how you evolve, because I mean, you were frontman for a fairly major musical outfit, right?
Yeah.
and you've done a lot of stuff which we'll go into. But could you give us a sense of, like, some of the seeds that have sort of been planted that have made you sort of travel down this pathway that you're on? If we go back a little bit to your,
definitely,
is that all right?
Yes, definitely, because I think it's good to summarize things and to show people, because I'm definitely a person to try and be open and show my path, so then other people don't have to go through the same struggles. And it is that thing where I do find, in a very strange way now, because of how different entertainment, music and the arts, how it's so commercialized. So that's what's taken over. Whereas before you could have your commercial arm and then you could have another arm. And even if we look at something, let's say poetry, you could have Benjamin Zephaniah, and Benjamin Zephaniah could just be a poet, or Lem Cisse could just be a poet. And they didn't have to be a poet and then a barista on the side and then 3 other different jobs. So it's these things where you could just be an artist, but now it's all skewed towards a commercial thing. So as a society, we're only going to see so much. Somebody also told me it's always good to, even when you're doing lots of different things, it's always good to at least say, what are you? So people know. So for me, I would say I'm a musician, because that's how I started off. Started off a pop musician with band Clean Bandit, and then I left. And then they got signed, which is fantastic.
The universe is doing something there, though. I'm sure it will make sense.
Right. So, but I didn't study music. I studied engineering. So I left to do a PhD in engineering, in chemical engineering. So, but then when that finished, then when the label wanted to release some of the songs which I'd written, so I went back and then started performing. And then that's where I got my footing into performing with the band. And I use that as sort of like an apprenticeship. So it was an amazing apprenticeship, because something you've written in student bedroom then ends up playing in Glastonbury on the other stage, 45,000 people. And I'm just looking over to Jack Patterson being like, Jack, we did this. So then after that, I was like, okay, I'm definitely not doing any more performances with the band, because like, we've done it. That's all that can happen. Then I had a solo career, and it's through that solo career that then I started to find my voice, where I always loved, even when you look at hip hop, I loved hip hop, and you had different types of hip hop. So you had like Goody Mob, you had Dead Prayers talking about eating healthy and veganism and all these other different things. You had Erykah Badu, even on the more R&B side, but then again that Afrofuturism, Afrocentrism centered in the earth and all of these different stories, and you have all these different movements. And there's different, there are other people who put social stuff into their work, even if it's NWA, where you're talking about police brutality. That's the thing we're still dealing with Black Lives Matter. And they were talking about that stuff quite bluntly. But so for myself, I've always loved layered music. But then the challenge is not to sound preachy to other people. So it was always sort of hidden in my music. Maybe I wasn't brave enough to do it, and but then in the pandemic, when just like every other art form, I lost all of my work touring, performing. So then as a musician, then you're like, okay, as you were saying, like, what does it mean to be a profession? So then it's, what does it mean to be sitting at home like everybody else, unemployed? And then we have to rely on the state, which in the capitalist thing is the evil thing, but now you have to rely on the state. So then there was the only one opportunity I got was from Julie's Bicycle and Arts Admin Season for Change to make a song. They wanted to go to a marginalized, any marginalized group or community or artist in the broadest sense, for them to have an artistic response to climate change, to come into the climate movement, to showcase before UN COP26 in Glasgow at the what was going to be the end of the year. So I thought, okay, this is the first time I've toured and performed in many different places, but this was the first time of then returning to Lewisham, my borough in southeast London, and being, okay, can I make any music for or about people directly in my community, somewhere where I had grown up?
Was that the invitation? The
invitation was just, okay, we want someone from a marginalized group, whether it's from, so my family being from Uganda, so I'm a black man, if people haven't seen my photos or anything like that. So yeah, or it could have been, and then the other artist at the one, we had an artist from the Roma community who was then trying to do books to take to Roma school children to talk about recycling. Then we had another artist who is of Korean origin, but then trying to do rewilding in prison. And then we had another group, two artists, two black female artists, again to look at rest and to take black women out into the countryside to find a time for rest and retreat. So as you can see, it's different groups and to use art in completely different ways. It wasn't just music. So mine, I'm a musician. It was like music video. But then I made a comic with my cousin Andrew Chiwanuka to try and get that into schools, because the story that hit me is, when we talk about environmentalism, you're like, oh, okay, polar bears, ice caps, sea level rising. It's not going to affect us in mighty London. We've got the Thames barrier. We're safe. So, and then it just hit me, the story of Ella Adu Kissi Deborah, the 9-year-old who died because of air pollution. And she went to primary school off the South Circular, as I went to primary school off the South Circular. So, and it's just, and again, I say this to say to other people, I wasn't actually doing Greenpeace marches age 5. So it's not like I was doing everything and I've always been this way. Of course, I always thought about it. But the reality is I hadn't thought about it as much as everybody's thinking about it. If we were all thinking about it, we wouldn't have been conned by Volkswagen with the diesel emission scandal. If we were all thinking about all these different things. So for me, it's just different stories where they pop up in your life when they resonate. So it just hit me like a lot of people when in pandemic. And it's like, okay, what can I use my art to do something? Let me give this a try and see where it goes.
So it's always fascinating for me, like all these stories of the pandemic, like all the, obviously there was a hell of a lot of struggle and grief and all kinds of complexity for so many people, but also in some ways that kind of mass disruption, that sort of putting the brakes on the machine, as painful as that was, there are also things that have started to emerge from that time that probably could never have happened. Do you know what I mean? Like,
exactly.
Look at your work that you're speaking to.
Exactly, because it just reminded us where we were all, regardless of what you do, everyone always has that pressure of, oh, I've got to make that meeting. Because otherwise, I mean, even if you're a secretary, your boss might say, oh, come in early to cover because I've got this big meeting. But then you got childcare, but then it's your job and it's, you had to balance and you're just running around like a headless chicken. And all then that pressure then filters onto your family, because then you got to ask whether it's your neighbors or your family, grandma or something else. And you look at all these different things. Then the pandemic came and said, stop. And then we all stopped and the world didn't actually fall apart. It didn't fall apart. But then we learned, like you said, with the pain and with the grief, it's because it was a deadly virus. It is serious. But then it goes to show, it highlighted where we're all packed in. We're all packed into these trains, these planes, these city centers, these tubes, these everything. And then the world's saying, no, that's not healthy. So now you've got to spread apart to stop this. And then it's really interesting, even when you look at the power dynamic, because I remember at the time when it happened it was in China, and then afterwards, then it was moving to Europe, and then it was in Italy. And then people in Europe were saying, oh, wait till it gets to Africa. Wait till it gets to Africa. They don't stand a chance. They've not got the hospitals. They've not got this. Now, I've been to Uganda when there was the Ebola crisis at the time. I had to be there for family reasons. Otherwise, I wouldn't have chosen to be there. But then the difference is people respect public health. And it's a thing where if there's a public health message and if there's community, people will protect each other. So again, there was the vaccine. there's so many rich people. Elon Musk bought Twitter for $44 billion. How much would it have cost to buy everybody vaccines? It would have cost less than $44 billion. So at that time, where could have taken $10 billion from the richest. In fact, he could have asked his mates. Could have asked all his mates, said $10 billion, here you go. Everybody gets the vaccine, and then we can decide. This isn't not about dictating to say, okay, right, let's get the vaccine and then push towards this type of world or that type of world. It was like, let's try and get a vaccine and then let people be in a position where they're healthy. You don't have to split apart families. You don't have to, you're able to care for the people more fragile in society. And then we can decide what we're going to do. But then people said, no, Africa didn't get the vaccines. But it's if we look at the death rates, you see black people are dying more in London than they were on the continent of Africa. And it's that sort of thing where hopefully it will show this Western European centric view that actually maybe we need to look further afield and listen to other peoples and see how they deal with things.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot there, but I think what some of the things you're saying and that I've experienced or witnessed is, again, if you saw this pandemic as another, for me, I always like to sort of keep myself in the space of mystery, right? So maybe we don't quite know, but we learnt a lot, and I think a lot of people, what you're speaking to is you've seen these structures at play, but a lot of people for the first time, I think, started to discover like what sits underneath this idea of modernity and progress is actually a hell of a lot of oppression for a lot of people. Yeah. And that suddenly became very evident when everything stopped. Yeah. Because we started to see, like you're speaking to, these things playing out. It also springs to mind to me as you're talking, something I've chatted to a lot is it feels like there's so much conversation we might be wanting to have still as a culture about what happened. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Because it's like it's almost never happened. So. Do you know what I mean? But so much happened. Yeah. And so much learning and so much, there would have been obviously a lot of pain, but there would have been a lot of joy in some ways. Yeah. We might have figured out collectively, like, actually what we don't want anymore. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly.
Opening that up. Yeah. But it feels again like, obviously this culture wants to move so quickly into the next. It's almost forget it, it's like because it's uncomfortable or whatever it might be. But so this project that took you into the, for you went into this through this kind of hole into the into air pollution, and obviously starting to see all of these connections to climate, to injustice, to climate justice, effectively all the kind of injustices that sit again hidden most of the time under this idea of what it means to live in a place. I mean, it was funny. It was Paul again. He's coming up again, but he was talking a bit about if I shut you in a room, put an exhaust pipe into that room, and turn the car on, I would get nicked and tried for murder. He said, but if your lungs are gonna gradually get diseased by walking around that street there, no one with a car is going to get prosecuted. In fact, they're going to get protected by the police or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, because again, and that's why it's these ways of saying, okay, how can we use our skills to change the frame? Because that's what art is. You can show someone has to live their life like this way, but then in art, whether it's a play, whether it's music or video, you can make the make believe and show somebody this is an alternate universe. You can like show them that. And then that's why it's law. Law is set up. Law is set up in such a way, and people can use it just to get more money by suing other people. But then surely you can use it in another way as well. You can use it in another way, in the same way you can build a structure, and that structure could be an artwork, or it could be a home. It's still a structure. It's like, what are you doing with it? You just change the way. If you say you're an architect or a sculptor, you just change the different things, but you could be doing the exact same thing. So, and I think those are the exciting things. And exactly as you're saying, we've kind of forgotten that this thing happened, and to talk about it. And I think that because there was a lot of trauma and grief that came about it, but then it was also the opportunity to actually spend time with the people we're close to. And then our jobs was taking us away from that. And then we had the time to reflect. And I think a lot of people did. It's whether you like rushing around on the tube, or would you rather sort of be at home and, you know, speak to people or enjoy some quality time, whoever surrounds you. And they don't need to be blood relatives. It could just be a randomer on the other side of the road who was a randomer, but then now is that thing which we used to call neighbor, you know?
Exactly. So it's a fellow human being.
Yeah, what are you doing upon hither? So yeah, it's all of these things. And then even like my video, Our World Fight for Air, that couldn't have happened if it wasn't for the pandemic.
Yeah, tell the folks a little bit about that.
We don't need hyperbole or distractions. Give us the facts, we don't want the factions. We have the people, we have the stories. Show us the pictures, not allegories. More than just a poster.
Yeah,
so I'll link to it all. But
so yeah. So that video, again. So what I thought is, how is my area represented, or even South London, or even inner city London? I mean, you've lived in London, and then when you see the news in London, it's always something is happening, or there's something at Wembley Stadium, it's the football, or there's Buckingham Palace, or it's really high level. It doesn't talk about the communities, and it's a really blunt thing where you have to ask yourself.
And if peaceful protest is to be banned, is it not underhand? For those of us who don't want to work hand in glove, we just want to have a hand in.
And the problem is the right wing press in the UK, because if you look at the press and just objectively look and say, who owns the big newspapers? How are the big newspapers funded? Who is it? What do they look like? Are they a certain age? Are they a certain demographic? And if they all turn out to be similar profile, then it's going to skew everything in a certain way. So when you look at London, they will say, London is metropolitan elite, which is the most bizarre thing, because I'd love them to come to Lewisham, Lambeth and Southwark and look at the majority and try and find these elites, you know? And it's the thing where if you look objectively and see where the most deprived boroughs in the country, and a lot of them are in London. And then on the one hand, it's metropolitan elites, and then on the other hand, it's like it's unsafe because of the stabbing, stabbing and knife crime and everything else. So which one is it? Is it elites, or is it like a hellhole? So I thought, and then there's the other thing of, black people of color don't get involved in the climate crisis. And it's like, well, maybe sometimes if you're not asking people the right questions or giving them the platform, then you're not going to know what they think. Because I can speak to my neighbors and they're black. I can speak to my family and they're black. And guess what? They do talk about it. And interestingly enough, they might have a more nuanced view of it, because with diaspora, and that's the power of something. Again, flip narratives. The power of diaspora is they might have family abroad who are experiencing the droughts in East Africa, flooding and hurricanes in the Caribbean. They can see all of this happening, and they can report back on it.
And also, I'm thinking, you know, have a way better understanding of how we live more in harmony with the living world than most people in this country do.
Exactly.
Because we're so separated here. Have been for so long.
Exactly. So when I'm in Uganda, my mum knows how to plant all these vegetables and things, because when they were young, regardless of whether they lived in the city or not, you had to go to the village. Even now, when you go to burial grounds, everyone's burial grounds are in the village, and you still have aunties and cousins and relatives there. So you have to know how to work the land. And even within Baganda, in my tribe, we've got 52 clans, and the clans, you're all linked to. It's not even just an animal. I'm monkey clan, but you can be like grass clan. So it's all these different things, and you're meant to look after your clan, your different thing. You're meant to look after whether it's a grasshopper, whether it's a lion. Yeah. So, and you're all these different
your kin,
things.
Your family.
Exactly. And there are these things where again, and when you think linguistically, how in certain languages the earth is it, and then the other is she, or, you know, it's not a thing. And the trees and everything, trees are living. It's all interlinked.
I think they did. I get this right, but I think I said, but even in some Native America, they would see trees as the tree nation. It's a sort of, again, it's another community.
Yeah,
of which we're connected to. Exactly, but has its own, you know, intelligence, and often, you know, in those cultures, and they're seen as the elders because they
Exactly.
were here before us.
Exactly. And it's a thing. So my grandma planted. So my mum's got an avocado tree, she's got a mango tree, she got a jackfruit tree. My aunt's got a jackfruit tree, and because she saw the value of that, and that's that same thing, and it comes back to time because the avocado trees. Oh, in New Zealand they were stealing them, so maybe I shouldn't advertise this. My mum does not have any avocado trees, but it takes time because avocado trees take 7 years to fruit. So the person planting it might not see the fruit, but then you do it for the future. So it's all of these things where you're doing this stuff for now to then say, how do you do it for the future? And then in the looking backwards, if you look at the older trees and the older things, then it's you then want to look after and to nurture these. So it's that thing where we're custodians. We're just here. Even my success of doing something is based off of the fact that, you know, you've got ancestors before and you want to continue, and it's for the people to come. So yeah,
it's beautiful. It's like this whole there's lots in all of this, but it's this sort of shift in this, you know, this to become to work more with humility, right, for who we are, and to sort of recognize that we're not this sort of individual self. We're sort of like, you know, there's all this other life that has brought us to this moment. We're still entangled with that life. Yeah. You know, both human and more than human. And sort of being able to step into this moment. I know it's, you know, it's hard with, you know, there's a lot of folks that are really struggling on so many levels. And I know sometimes it's hard to even step back and, you know, have that awareness that you might be part of something bigger that's going on because you're just trying to, you know, feed yourself, get stuff done. You know what I mean? Yeah. But at the same time, I often come back to this thing that, you know, it's looking for all of these shifts that the world is sort of, you know, calling on us to go about. And actually some of it just feels just shifts in, you know, awareness and consciousness and, you know what I mean? What it might mean to be human in this time. And,
and I think that's the challenge. I mean, that's the challenge when I look at it, because it is tough. When you look back in the 90s, even back in the UK, 2012, where everybody, against all expectation, the Olympics were a success because Britain, the Team GB won medals. It was sunny, the weather was nice, and everyone came together. And even culturally, that had a big play because Danny Boyle talked about the creation of the NHS and Windrush with all nurses coming from.
God, when was that again? It wasn't that long ago, was it? When was that?
2012. It seems like a lifetime. That
seems like the last maybe moment where things felt sort of normal-ish.
Exactly. And then you saw where, yes, it was sport, but they said, look, let's bring in all of this culture, let's bring in these different stories and these different narratives, and everybody loved it. Everybody loved it, and it was uplifting when everyone in society comes together. So but then after that, all of these other things came in. So the role, I think, as an artist, if you're going to play that position, it's the role is to say, how can you either uplift people who are busy doing the essential. So when the pandemic came, and then we suddenly realized the key workers weren't the bankers, it's actually the carers.
Most of us were irrelevant.
You know? Well, exactly. I was thinking, I'm pretty irrelevant out here. So actually that's very true. So you look at the key workers, and it's to say, okay, well, if they're providing that, and the people who really make the world go round by looking after us through care, through nurture, through all of these other different things, even bus drivers, they're busy trying to look after us. Then you've got to say, as an artist and a creative person, you've got two options. Either one, when everything is tough, you're providing them with some type of entertainment so they can take their mind off of things, some escapism, some hope, that vision of hope in whatever way, where they can just switch off from all the terrible things that they have to be, being in a care home and you're seeing all of these, or being in the front line of hospitals, or being a doctor. So you've got to either provide something where you can reassure to say, oh, look, here's some comfort where you can take time off of what you're doing. Or the other thing is to make yourself relevant, to say, how can you make sure we don't end up in this situation? How can we alert people? So then it's the thing to say, okay, right, now let me go and discover, because scientists have looked at this thing, whether it's with global warming. The oil companies, they have reports from the 70s talking about it. And even culturally, you go back to Marvin Gaye, What's Going On? And you look at the song and you look at the lyrics of what that singer, who was an R&B singer, very talented one, but what he was talking about in terms of the climate crisis, it's all there in the album. So you can't say, oh, this is a new thing just in the 2000s. Look, if the simple singers who, you know, they were just there for entertainment could talk about it at that period of time, 50 years ago, why can't we now? That's just willful ignorance. And actually, it's not just willful ignorance. It's lying to other people, because we can see that the evidence is out there. So now is the challenge is as a musician, that's what I would say I'm fundamentally, is to then go and find out where these things are, and then to try and bring them to people to say, oh, well, look, here's a bunch of other people. So with my video Our World, here's a bunch of Lewisham residents who say the refrain is, do we really care? Yeah. Do we really care? Yeah, because we'll fight for our air. So people in Lewisham do care about the quality of their air that they're breathing in all of the time. So that was one thing to say, okay, I'm providing a frame which is a music video and a song, as opposed to saying, leave your job, leave everything, your family, go stand in line, sign a petition, go to your counsellors who might not necessarily listen. Whereas if they see a music video and you can see there's Black people, there's South Asian people, there's Southeast Asian people, there's East Asian people, there's all of these, there's Turkish people, there's European people, there's British people, there's all of these different people in the community saying, actually, we do care about this issue. So you can't deny and say, oh no, these people are too busy just working. No, I've asked them a specific question, and yeah, they all wanted to come into the video. And that is a thing, coming back to with the pandemic, that might not have been possible because the pandemic pulled people together. And then people had to go to their local shops because they were, whichever country you were in, you couldn't travel that far. Yeah. So then you're forced to then revert back to what we already had, and then bring people in.
We live on a life-giving rock called Earth, hurtling through space. How bonkers is that? You're listening to the Spaceship Earth podcast.
Yeah, and I think you know, for many of us that felt good, right? It's
exactly,
like, because it's like that's kind of, you know, that's how we're designed as social beings.
Exactly.
to be in relationship with each other and stuff. And yeah, I mean, what I love about in that work, and then there's this, you know, you've explored some knotty stuff, right? There was the social housing project as well. But what I love, you know, again, I think about, we explore this metaphor in the podcast of becoming crew, like stepping in to this time and trying to participate in these shifts in whatever way is right for you and your gift and your energy. But what I love about, like, you're speaking to, you know, by doing that, to bringing the community around in that place and being able to sort of manifest something which speaks to the big macro problem that we're facing, you know, the complex thing of climate breakdown, but through the lens of the issue which is really being felt in that place, toxic air. You're able to sort of shift things and make connections and help others maybe in other parts of the system. Yeah, sort of build that understanding of what climate breakdown, you know, what an element of that looks like now, today.
Exactly, yeah.
And I feel like that's, again, there's no right or wrong to any of this. It's just like, how can I use my energy in a way, and what you're doing, what you're weaving through music and creativity is beautiful, because you're able to sort of show things as well. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sort of play back. Almost a bit of mirroring about what's actually happening in these places in ways that policy and campaigning, and so I think that all of these things are important, but it's just fascinating. And as I say, then I saw the project, is it Home Zero? Right? Yeah. Tell us about that.
Yes, Home Zero. So having looked at the air pollution issue, which is not easy to write a song about air pollution. I was like, oh my goodness, okay, I sort of got away with that. Then was approached by National Gallery X and Nesta, and they wanted to there was a very specific brief, which was home emissions. So emissions within domestic housing situations are one of our biggest contributors to greenhouse gases, because in the UK especially, a lot of the whole country is pretty much run on gas central heating systems in some shape or form, whether it's for gas boilers or gas cooking. So Nesta made it a mission to say, how can we change to have heat pumps, which instead of using gas, you can use either heat from the ground or heat from air, and then do some fancy engineering to then.
That's where the tech comes in.
That's where the tech comes in. So they're saying, how can we put that into and encourage people to move towards that to then reduce our greenhouse emissions? So they want to do that, but then use a collection of the National Gallery, which is one of the biggest collections in the UK, or probably the biggest, I think. And to use that, all these different paintings, and then to use some sort of artistic intervention to bring this all together. And I looked at that and I was like, oh my goodness.
Where'd you start with that?
Where do you start? I don't know much about heat pumps. And then I thought, well, I didn't really personally like the brief. So I said, what's the point in, again, because when you look at climate, if people put it on the homeowner-centric individual thing, do you have a car? Because even air pollution, you notice from my project, I've never, because then it expanded to Lambeth and Southwark, a live and breathe, bigger project. You realize I never say it's about this individual car owner or that individual car owner. These aren't individual issues. It's about doing the system change. So then if people talk about choice, that's the whole point. If you're coming from a capitalist thing, it's about choice. You give people the choice in terms of saying, look, here's public transport, mass transport, which you're pooling everyone's resources and making your life a bit easier. So you've got that choice, it's affordable. Then you can then choose to do your own individual choice on the other hand. If you make it so much easier, the group societal option, then that helps. And that's the whole thing about the NHS. You know, you pool everything together, and everyone in the UK loves the NHS. As long as it's still there and we still protect it. So with this, it's moving away from saying heat pumps. Do you have a heat pump? Do you not have a heat pump? Because number one, they cost money. Number two, you have to own your home. So then if you want to reach out to, let's say, 18 to 35-year-olds, say, okay, how can you engage them to bring them into these different institutions to see all the amazing art that's in there? How can you talk to them if you're talking about an issue where you're talking to Generation Rent about a solution which is for homeowners and landlords? So I thought, can we make this about sustainable social housing? So then you can bring people in to say, okay, what does our social housing look like, and how can we push? So for all social housing things to have heat pumps and to be built to that greener standard. And then it becomes, and that's the thing which I found this all myself just by tackling this air pollution thing. The point is I go and I have to think about it. That's the whole point of being an artist. It's not necessarily, you might have a talent for painting or for singing notes, but then you have to put the notes in the order or the words all together for other people, for it to help other people. I mean, you can do it for yourself, but then you can also do it for other people, which isn't so bad. So with this is to try and look at the issue, tackle it, and then to put it in an interesting and hopefully uplifting way. Yeah. So with the social housing thing, you then realize all of the things which are then linked in, and you're like, people, then you go and you look at all of the different connected things, and you realize people have been living, even if you're not an eco warrior or green person, you realize people have been living in substandard housing, and it's pertinent and painful because we're in West London at the moment. We just got Grenfell just round the corner. So, and it's these type of things where not only are people not building things which are sustainable, it's that they're actually harmful to how you're living. And then indoor air pollution is actually a massive thing. So then if you can make a project where I said, okay, let's have a workshop where I can try and invite paying the participants aged 18 to 35, people of color, and then all genders. So for them to also learn to say your opinion is worth something. So it's not about, okay, Black Lives Matter. Well, the black people, quick, let's get the answers. Yeah. And then they're still, not only have they poured out their heart, they haven't got anything off the back of that. It's quite painful. So they say, okay, well, if we're in the capitalist system, let's make sure the people who are providing the solutions, they get remunerated in some shape or form, and then they learn that at least they have some knowledge.
Well, you're also you're signaling a different way of being, aren't you? Which is like
Exactly.
inquiry, community, co-creation.
Exactly.
Like exploring these things together.
Exactly.
And we understand that intelligence is everywhere in everyday people.
Precisely. So then you do that, and then the workshop. So then I brought in some B Corp architects. I brought in Abhi Jitendra from Citizens Advice to talk about the cost of living, because how this fits into all of the story, and then also the mission director from Nesta, then talk a bit more about the heat pumps, and then Lisa Isanza from Galdem, who writes about the history of black squatting, because there is, and how black squatting was used as squatting is a form of activism which is necessary, otherwise things won't change. So you piece that all together, and then off the back of that workshop, then it was to do a performance where I don't know what the order was, but after some conversations, National Gallery gave me their 3 largest rooms. I wanted the biggest room, and then they weren't sure, and then they said, okay, we'll give you 3. So the Italian room, the Spanish room, and then the British room with the Turners, the Constables, and Gainsboroughs. And then for that, then it's about, okay, what do you do in these different things? What's the bonus of this? It's like, okay, there's a great massive space. Then I said, okay, right, let me just make the music. And then let me collaborate with bringing an all-black cast. So I had 2 poets and then 2 dancers. So one Solomon Ode B, who stood on the Colston plinth when the Colston statue got pushed over in Bristol.
Yeah.
And he's from Bristol. Is part of the Bristol, in the Bristol community. And then Kieran Rennie, again, talking about his experience, those 2 poets. And then Paris Crossley doing body popping and whacking all the way through the Italian gallery. And I had Solomon standing in front of the King of Spain, who's a big slave owner. And then Kieran was in front of Raphael painting. And then Crystal Lowe in front of the Turners, a black ballet dancer who's Bermudan born but based in Wales, in Newport in Wales. And again, it's all these different things where you've got these platforms, you can make all these different stories. So with Crystal, she was in Newport, and then we just did it via video link beforehand, because I showed her the space and everything. And it's that same thing where even if we're not talking about diaspora, even within the UK, you can work with people who don't have to be in London, and they don't need to, yes, you can instead of driving, you can catch a train, but actually you don't even need to.
No, well, the pandemic helped us with that, didn't it?
Exactly.
There's a thing called Zoom.
Yeah, exactly. And then that's what we did, just round the gallery, and it's these innovative. It forces you to be. We don't need
HS2.
Yeah, it forces you to be innovative, and then based on all of that, and it was then talking about having that conversation about sustainable social housing. And it's just one of those weird things, because surely that makes sense, because on economies of scale, if the social housing providers, number one, let's look at what they're actually doing. And if they do it, then instead of trying to get 1 million homeowners to buy heat pumps, you've got social housing providers buying 5 million heat pumps straight away. So, and then that makes it cheaper for the 1 million other people. So it's like, even if you say we're in a capitalist system and we want to use it, then why don't we use our nous and say, let's do this to make a better solution. And then when they're talking about British engineering and so on and so forth, and global Britain post-Brexit, guess what? Build them in the UK and all of these other things. But then when you realize, even within the capitalist model, which I'm not a fan of, then they realize they're pushing back on that. Then you realize it's not capitalism, it must be something else. There has to be something else, so it's not working within that. So it's like we're Paul using the law, where it's like, okay, well, let's do this through the law. Yeah. And then you realize, it's not about the law. It's about something else. Then at least tell us what that something else is, put it into the open, and then it's not about me as an individual or an artist or musician or whatever saying, it's about showing the widest cross-section of society as possible. This is what's happening. And then society comes back and then it says, okay, this is our path. In the same way, I didn't like Brexit. But as society, we decided, apparently, in whatever shape or form we decided. So it's like, yeah, now let's suck it up.
But it's on that though. I don't want to get into Brexit, but on that though, I'm just imagining, because what you're doing, I mean, what I think is so brilliant about that story you've just shared and that project, you know, you got approached, you know, this issue of heat pumps and gas and, you know, how do we kind of reduce emissions in housing? Yeah. And look where you ended up, right? Yeah. What came through that process. Yeah. And I mean, you know, I've seen the film of in the galleries and stuff, and I'll link to it all, but extraordinary. And you just think but like you say, you're opening something up that is really complex. There's loads of stories that sit underneath that story of kind of like, oh, how are we going to reduce emissions in houses, right? And then you've gone, it's a lot more complex than that, right? Yeah. And there's all these power dynamics at play and all these relations at play. And yet through music and performance and the way that you've gathered people around this question, you've kind of opened up a whole, I mean, the learning feels like it was immense, you know, in terms. And so what I love about this, and, you know, again, when we think of all, like, you know, we could say the Brexit thing, but imagine if Brexit had used an approach like that, where it allowed people to sort of explore these questions in community. Yeah. Before we make these decisions.
Precisely.
You know what I mean?
Precisely, because all of these things it's never about, I mean, even within families, different people in your family, they still have different views. And I think that's what we've lost, the fact that you should be able to disagree with other people. As long as you're not actively harming people, people can hold different things. I loved Nas, the rapper. My sister loved Jay-Z. And that actually, music back in the day, you used to like one thing or the other. It was Blur or Oasis, and that was a thing. You had your own thing. Beatles, Rolling Stones, or whatever the thing was. You had your own thing, and it's fine because everyone is an individual. But then you can coexist because you know what binds you together is what's more important than some of these other superficial things. And then you can start, and then it's all these different tricks where one of your original, at the beginning, you were just talking and saying it seems quite rare. Now, I must admit, it is rare, and it surprises me that for a number of reasons why more artists don't do it, even if you're going to, say, pop musicians, and you wonder why more don't do this. So instead of, and I can understand why, because again, it shouldn't just be on the responsibility of a musician or artist. Some just want to make music about whatever their issues is. There's so many massive issues here. For instance, women's rights, gender equality, gender parity, payment parity. So you can't tell someone who's trying to battle this thing, which is ridiculous, oh, now you need to be doing air pollution and illusion, when they've, you know, there's so many different things, and we can have multiple voices doing different things. So it does surprise me, but as an individual, where I am, where it's like play to your strengths, is if I can get into these different places, I can show it's possible, I can approach all these things. And then guess what? This is the biggest learning of them all. Going to the National Gallery, it was brilliant, and they were brilliant because they let us do that, and they didn't need to. So, and that is the biggest gallery in the UK. So then you can go to the other galleries and say, wait, why are you not doing all of this stuff? So then it's the sort of thing to say, look, they gave it a go, and it was a different audience that came through. It was a big audience. It was a different audience. And then you had other people coming in to then talk about art, talk about the role of culture and everything. So in the same way, you might have, there are certain things which you need to get rid of, and certain things were got rid of in the past. Henry VIII got rid of the Catholic Church to bring in Church of England. So if the King of England isn't the most, or Britain isn't the most British thing, then I don't know what is. So again, you look at it, it's like these things can change. These things can definitely change. So then when you look at in different spaces where we have all of these different spaces and say, what is the power of, yes, we can talk about, let's say, slavery and how money was obtained to get these spaces. And yeah, you can still do all of that work. But then whilst we're here, especially if we're talking about the green economy. We can't just knock down buildings we're not happy with. We can't just knock them down. Because then we'd have to build new buildings.
Right.
But we can open them up and then make more people feel comfortable of coming in there. And then it's a place where we can meet other people. It's about meeting people that we wouldn't necessarily meet all the time. Because I don't want to talk to the same people and we just sit around and go, oh, I agree. I agree too. I agree.
Well, it's kind of like the way I'm sort of sensing into the world is this, you know, I came from a music background. I was a DJ back in the late 80s, 90s, and I'm really always been interested in remix culture, you know, and for me, that's the spirit of these times that we're being called to do, is whether it's buildings, to reimagine them or repurpose them, or the relationships that we might, you know, believe, you know, what is this space for? And we have a story in our heads of what it might have been, you know, but again, how can we reimagine these spaces, or how do we bring different people in to re-explore these relationships together? Do you know what I mean? And actually, we're trying to find new ways of being in relationship with each other, with the world around us, you know. And so I think there's something really, for me, that idea of sort of remixing and sort of reimagining and trying these different kind of, you know, combinations and experiments that allow new kind of energies to emerge and new types of relationships to emerge between people.
Exactly. And remix, that's the whole point, because again, remixing, it took a producer or a DJ to pick something that somebody else didn't know, and then to say, now I'm presenting it to the audience, and then suddenly, oh, you like it now. You really like it now. And it's
just shifting something.
Yeah, you just shift it. It's just even where you think it happens culturally, and look how rich that is. I mean, we're not just all eating fish and chips, you know, or just having like boiled potato. It's a thing where someone was like, oh, okay, chicken tikka masala. How do I change something for the taste buds or something? How do I just change the thing? Yeah. And then suddenly it's really popular. And then the point there is it's not about bashing everything that, because again, you can bash everything that you don't like, or you can provide opportunities so that people can find something they do like.
Yeah.
And I think that is the difference. So if we were talking about with let's say with cancel culture, it's a thing where you can cancel somebody, and it's not necessarily about if you're canceling someone you don't agree with, but you have to ask, are these other voices that we should be hearing from, are they being uplifted? And I think that's where the work needs to be, where we're uplifting other voices, where people have practical concerns. So if I go back to air pollution, and then you wonder around schools, should young children, where it affects them the most, should they be suffering from air pollution and the like from car exhaust? And then until you speak to parents, and then the parents say, this is why I have a petrol car. Number one, this is why I have a petrol car or this type of car, because this is what I can afford. And then also the school system says that I have to drop my child off at 8:20, and then my work starts at 8:30. And guess what? The school system shows that these two siblings can't even be in the same school, so I need to zip around and drop them off. Then you sort of wonder, why is work 9 to 5?
Yeah.
Why is the school system like this? And why is it not aligned?
Yeah.
And then why is it? How does this make sense? So we have enough schools that people can walk to school.
Yeah.
Because I'm pretty sure that that same parent does not want to go through the whole palaver of strapping their child into this metal box every single that's just stressful. So you look at all of these things, and then you can understand. But then if you had that same mother or father, parent, carer or whatever, if you had them then talking about policy, then you would understand this is what's going on.
You're listening to the Spaceship Earth podcast with my dad, Dan Burgess.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot in all of this, but I feel like we're stuck as a cult, a society, whatever we want to call it, in this modern sort of place that we find ourselves in. There's a lot of stuckness in terms of, what to evolve, where to go, because we've built a very complex system based on kind of speed and the fact that most of it actually runs on death in some ways.
Yeah.
Whether it's everything that's kind of having to be for this kind of slick modern existence to happen. There's a hell of a lot of stuff we're starting to see and understand. But I think one of the not the answer, but one of the way forward is this: we need more diversity of everything, right?
Yeah.
Of ideas, of the ways that we organise. Like you took us to schools, and you know exactly that. Like why are kids even being put in a room for 9 hours every day?
Yeah.
Why is everyone doing it at the same time? Like you say, like. Why are them parents having to? I mean, it's insane, really. What we feel, what we call normal life.
Yeah.
And so there's the overwhelm in that, or there's, I think, to what you're trying to do as well, is that if we can allow ourselves ways to sort of step back and see what's sitting under all of these things, and then involve more of us in how do we sort of step into something new.
Yeah.
It's extraordinary what is possible, right? But when we allow it all to be sort of done in this command and control centralized way, I voted for that person, and come on, get it done for me. That's such a broken, and I know that's massive, but it's making me think, because I've got a feeling that you and I could talk for a long time.
I think so too.
I'd love to get into music, right? Because I came across. I think I first came across you. It might have been 2020. Your "Find Another Way" song.
Amazing.
I think. I think that's when I first came across you, and then I came across you again. I think specifically, when Earth Percent was sort of emerging.
Yeah.
But I've subsequently dug into your music, and you've made a lot of music. You've done a lot.
I have. Yeah.
And so I'd love to just the music I've listened to. I mean, for me, there's a lot in it feels to me there's a lot of energy in your. There's actually a lot of insight. There's a lot of intention. It feels to me. You talked earlier about obviously we're as artists we're working with what makes us alive, right? And what is it? But it feels like there's always, at least what I can sort of sense listening to your stuff, is there is there's a lot of curiosity, but there's also you're working a lot, it feels, with a lot of the edges that are out there, and not in a beautiful way, to try and that's what it feels like to me anyway. But I'd love to dig into a bit of your music.
Bring the reparations. How you gonna settle the scars? How you gonna live in the pain?
And then also speak to the Earth Percent work, and then we can close with the Philharmonia work, because I know that's but I would love to, if you could tell us a bit about that, and particularly, I guess, also as as the Earth Percent is starting to grow, I'd love to also get a sense from you, like, to that question we asked, do you get a sense that more music artists are really starting to understand what's coming down the line, and how that tension, because I know there's so much tension in art and creativity, right? It's like, there's this whole idea of, well, I perform my music and create my art because it's my thing, and I'm not sure I want to sort of, but we're in we've never been in this position before as a species, so it's not really a nice to have.
Exactly.
And I'd argue it's potentially the most creative place as well. But I'd love to just know a bit about your musical.
Oh no, thanks, because that's great. Because the thing is, I love music. Some of my stuff is just a rebellion, in the sense where I know I can be stubborn, and there's some people out there who aren't stubborn. And my general feeling is talent can come and wisdom can come from everywhere, and that's my base level. That's why I go. Yesterday I was in Migration Museum with Sita Brahmachari, an author, and then her illustrator Nashi Sira, because I'm with secondary schools from Lewisham, and the reason there is because you have to go out and reach these people. Because if I look and I just put on whether it's a streaming thing or radio, and if I feel right now, especially in the UK is a special place. London's very special as well, just because it's so diverse. But if I feel the music isn't reflected, or the cultural thing is, we've got these problems. Who are the people, whether they like it or not, who are the people to shift things forward? When there was the apartheid movement, it was Free Nelson Mandela. You had a song, Free Nelson Mandela. You had everything like that, and you had all people coming forward. You had in South Africa across, where you look people, whether it was South Asian, whether it was the black Africans, the indigenous people, or whether it was the Jewish people. You see, and you look at the apartheid movement, you look at the African National Congress, you had everybody coming together. But now if you can't see that, then my thing is, we need to go and encourage people to say, take up the arts, because it might be a painting, it might be a meal, it might be something. We need something other than what the status quo is doing now to get us out of this funk. And for that's why don't feed the school kids, don't marginalize it, because it might be that person. You look at Einstein, he wasn't from the aristocracy, or you look at whoever these different people are, and you really need to give people courage. So for myself, I know I'm stubborn, and it was a thing where I felt in the major label system and how everything, where the independence, I mean, you must have seen the independence have dropped, because before the independence, people wanted to be on the things. And when you look at our, most amazing labels, when you look at Factory Records or something like that, you're like, this is around the whole Manchester thing. It's like, that is timeless. That's a big change. And it's like, where is that now? So it's difficult because it's shifted to the major label thing. But then that can't stop people from getting their music out. And if you're thinking long term, a bigger thing, if I make the music, people will hopefully discover it. And then if I can persevere, then hopefully then that makes it easier for other people to then come through and to say, look, there is a value behind this. Like I said, I studied quite a lot, and it was engineering. And when you get to a stage where now society, there are messages saying, don't do art, go to cyber, by people who didn't even do science and engineering to the level that I did it. And they're in government and they're talking this nonsense. So it's that thing to come by providing hope. And I do feel music, especially now, you've got to think as an artist, what are you then doing? Now you can stream everything. You can't just be the fake Spice Girls, because with the same click, you can do the real Spice Girls. You can't be the fake Beatles. You can't be the fake Destiny's Child, because it'll take Destiny's Child 6 months, or Beyonce. This is when you know you're getting old, when your references are like, young people are going to be like, who are these people? But stream them. You can go and find them. You can't just copy, because back in those days, it will take them 6 months to then the Strokes or whoever to then come over. So you could just copy them quickly. You can't do that. So you've got to be talking about the time. Even when you look at paintings, you go into the National Gallery, in some way Turner was talking about the time, because he's got steam engine in there. He couldn't have painted that 200 years before. And then it's the other thing is, are we at least you can, and that's why I loved hip hop and rap and everything else, because it documents the time that's around. So if we're here now, how can we not be documenting the time? How can we not be showing something? So even when I listen to some of my previous songs, it's really interesting, because I'm thinking, what was it like in 2016? It's like, oh, okay, that's what I was thinking. And even as yourself, you grow and you progress. So it's just a matter where, and for me, I don't blame the people who are in their jobs in the cultural sector across the UK, where it's now getting slashed. I do think there's a responsibility where I think, let's say Arts Council, who cut so much money, the board, they should resign. Like, resign. Don't take the check. If you can't go out and publicly defend it, just resign. Jeremy Hunt, who's now the Chancellor, he cut 30% of the arts funding in 2010. I talked about 2012. But sometimes you need responsibility. If you do something, it's going to make a difference down the line. When you're talking about saying you got a neurodiverse mind, where school is so, I was lucky I was good at school, good at school, because I could memorize, and that's all it is. But then how do you then say to young children, how can you provide something, a different way for someone to express themselves? It might not be with the English language syllabus. It might be through music. It might be through singing. It might be through painting. And we need all of that because I think that will get us out. But we also need to encourage other people. So then that's why I was like, let me pile on. I don't care what anyone else says. I'm stubborn. I'm going to write this music. And in terms of on the big scale, we need to think about how people are getting paid, just because capitalism is broken. Again, it doesn't work. It doesn't pay to go to work across the globe. So that's another issue. But in the interim, I'm like, let me continue making my music and seeing where it takes me. And then by making music, and then people can look back and say, oh, this is interesting. So they might come across, find another way, which again, that was again spurred on by our world. I felt, okay, let me make something of the time with a video just to show this is what it's not. Black Lives Matter was supported by all different types of people. And that's where it helped. It's not about just black people saying that and then it's become oppression from one minority. That's not the answer. It's not trying to flip to say, okay, you oppressed us, now we want to be in power. It's about everyone coming together. So there was, as an artist, you need to do that. You need to work through your art, and then you then get these opportunities that then other people can then see, oh, actually, yeah, no, you are a musician. Come and you want to do something in our art gallery. Come and do something over there. And we know the music's going to be interesting or of a standard. Come and have fun. And then that leads me on to these other things. And then with the Philharmonia artist in residence, this is another thing where it's, I guess, my career, and just like with anybody, sometimes it's who doesn't give you the opportunities, which then shapes the opportunities which you then go and get. So, and that's in the classical world. And they said, yeah, you've got an opportunity to work with our world-class musicians. And as a musician, where I used to read, as a fan, you'd read the liner notes, you'd say, oh my God, who was in James Brown's band? Who's this person? Who's like Maceo Parker? Who's Bootsy Collins? Oh my goodness. Bootsy Collins is then doing like this thing with Bad, Bad, Not Good. You're like, oh my goodness, how does this stretch all of these different things? Jake Collier's with Quincy Jones, and Quincy Jones did the thing with Frank Sinatra. And you look at all of these, and it goes back to nature, where you see branches and roots and everything like that. And
Beautiful.
And then in the midst of all of this, again, because I was still making my music, I was still persevering, and then that's when Earth Percent sort of pops up.
Yeah, well, because I mean, I've talked about Earth Percent a fair bit on that, but people just remind people, like, yeah, and your journey into it, but just, and where it's at and what it's trying to do. And
yeah, so Earth Percent, it's really interesting. So like I said, I studied engineering at university for a long time, and even did like research into lasers, which makes people laugh. Lasers, not laser disco. Lasers, it was serious. And then again, where things take time, one of the first meetings that my old publisher set me up with was someone called Adam Callan. And then 7 years passed, and then Adam then hit me up. He's like, oh, you did science and then you do music, and yeah, there's a thing we're trying to bring together, and it's to do with the environment, and obviously you can speak to the music creative side, but then maybe even the science side, because there is a science element to climate crisis and looking at that. And Brian likes what you do. And I'm like, who's Brian? He's like, Brian Eno. And I was like, he's not heard my music, thank you. I'm like, what is this? And he's like, look, he's bringing people together. Do you want to, to see how the music industry, as a creative industry, can give back to the planet? And because all of our success, in whichever shape or form, is through extraction of
we can't exist
things
without the earth.
Exactly. So if we're happy to take the profits, then we should also use that to then figure out a better way. Whilst we're looking for solutions, but then also to try and mitigate some of these things. And then it happened again during the pandemic. So it was when I got involved to join the committee, and it just involved some Zooms with some amazing people, with the co-founders, and looking broadly to say, oh, are there music lawyers? Are there managers? Are there people from major labels, from the independent labels? Are there trying to get some artist voices and artists in different way? Are there different voices from different groups and ages, and trying to look terms of not just UK, but a broader, more global thing? And the idea behind Earth Percent is to, within a period of time, try and get 100 million from the music industry to then go towards climate litigation, And there are different strands which you'll see on the website, and different things. So schemes in terms of how do we improve our own practices, whether it's in festivals or the infrastructure, also litigation to then say how do we put structures in terms of policy, and then also for artists, because some who want to make an air pollution song, good, but then others who don't and say I don't have time to look to see
to weave it into my music,
exactly.
But I'm happy to give you a % or
precisely, and this is like a nominal thing because the main aim is to go to the big industries and say, so it's just, it could be 1% of whether it's your touring or publishing. It's just like a small thing, but then when you look at it, and from touring you can give a live agent 10%. So if you're giving the earth 1%, it's already, if you've got an industry which is fine for commission to be taken off, then it's just that interesting issue. But then the main point is to then go to the main power brokers and then say, look, we've got all these different artists who are contributing in whatever way. And even if they can't give a percentage, there was a Bandcamp campaign around Earth Day last year.
I bought a load of that stuff.
Well, exactly. So it's good to see what other ways can people use their voice. And there's so many great people who are involved in it. But then for myself personally, given I've got a song called Stop Making Sense.
Stop making sense out of breaking young heart.
It's a bit wild to speak to Brian Eno, where you think, just even from aside from music, and because he's done music and then gone into visual arts. Now I'm going more into visual, whatever, multidisciplinary thing. But just to speak to somebody who's still got that energy and that sort of the curiosity and the hunger to say, look, I could be on a beach somewhere else where he doesn't need to write another song. He doesn't need to make any more art. He doesn't need to do anything. But it's a genuine passion to say, I'm still curious. How can we leave the world in a better way? And to use the platforms we've got. How can we do that to actually make a difference? And for me, and I hope for anybody else who might be, say, struggling or feel like they're producing a lot of music or doing a lot in their work, whether it's writing a book, making a podcast, or trying to set up a nursery, it's fascinating to see that it's possible to not lose that hunger, to not lose that curiosity and to not lose that hope.
Yeah.
And that's the exciting thing.
Yeah, it is, and it's it's that sort of, it's expanding, and what's Brian speaks it, doesn't he? Is it the long here and the long now? I can't remember the phrase he uses, but that expansive view of time, and look, we're operating right here in this now, in this moment. Yeah. But like you say, we if we're able to put some of that long-term thinking, into our work today, like you say, whether it's how we are with children, whether it's how we're thinking about the food, or through our art, I think that's where this can really start to come alive, doesn't it? Because it brings us back to that point, like, we are here, we're part of this evolutionary story, we're in a lot of trouble right now. And what does it take just to sort of expand the heart a bit, and just to sort of, it's not stopping what we're doing, it's just kind of doing it in a slightly different way. Do you know what I mean?
I love that, expand the heart. I think that's the main thing, because again, with some of this fear, it makes it easier if you can show that other people are doing this, and it's to provide, so it's safe, you're not the first person over the parapet. And then this is the really exciting thing for myself, where I'm showing it's the different orchestras, like Philharmonia, who I'm working with, well, whether it's National Gallery, whether it's Philharmonia at Royal Festival Hall, they really enjoy it because you've come with your own catalogue of what you're doing, and then they can see. And then when they can see, it's a bigger system. And then when we get to the tipping point, when all artists are saying, actually, let's use our skill musically, whether I play the violin, the oboe, the timpani, and just by playing, you don't have to say, I'm making a specific, I've got the answer, this is what I'm doing. Just by playing or being part of something in terms of creating something new, it's really exciting. And that's what we need, because audiences, you've got to be realistic. People, I think too much money went into the music industry in terms of how much tickets cost based on how much people were earning. And then if it becomes too exclusive, then who's really going to, what way can people enjoy this? And can it reach the people that you really need to?
Yeah.
So then if you can bring something which is new and then is going to attract other people, you have to work harder as an artist or an institution or something. You have to work harder. But then it's so much fun and it's so interesting where it's like, let's have, because that's another thing with Earth Percent or, and again, with Earth Percent, there's so many other, so Earth Percent is trying to make a mechanism to set up so you can distribute to all these other different groups. It's not about it's working in collaboration rather than standing on the toes of other people. And then if it was fashionable and if it was the clever logistical thing to say, actually, we're automatically going to give this money and because this is where we live. We live in a world which is a capitalist world. So we need to put real money behind some of these different things. Because the other people on the other side, they're putting real money in terms of creating TV stations, creating all of this other thing. So it's like on this other side, we can't just make a couple songs like mine and pat myself on the back. It needs heavy lifting. So if that's all in place, then you wouldn't need an Earth Percent. So that's the main thing. I think all charities, this is just my own thinking, all charities should try and aim to work themselves out of existence, because then that's when you've made the shift. And I think it is the power, if you bring people together and you can show there's a power of music and creativity. And I think it definitely 100% is changing, because I'm seeing it in all of the commissions which I'm now getting, whether it's from Kew Gardens, whether it's from South Bank Centre, whether it's from wherever. They're all thinking, how can we amplify what people are worried about? And they're worried about the climate, because it was 40-degree heat last year.
Yeah, right.
In London.
Right.
You know?
And I mean, it brings us, you know, maybe this is where we think about coming to a close, because although I could quite happily talk all afternoon, but you got stuff to do, I got stuff to do. But this whole idea, back to art, back to creativity, back to culture, and my own journeying over the last 2 decades along these different strands of what we're sort of facing into. And I always see I understand the fear that a lot of people have. And I feel, again, we've been part of, again, a story that's told us, the capitalism story, which you spoke so well to, and where we maximized everything way beyond what it should have been. All became about money, monetization. Like we don't have that space anymore anywhere for the experimentation, the play, the community, the connection, the stuff that doesn't matter if there's any money involved. But because the systems have been built around us now that are so extractive on every front, we've got to let go of things as well as step into this new stuff. So I think I feel like all of creativity and culture and art, and I know there's a lot going on the ground. There's a lot of amazing stuff happening, but I just feel like, just encouraging more people who are in these spaces just to step in now and follow follow what their heart's telling them, because I'm sure everyone's feeling it,
Exactly. Definitely. And the one thing I could say is I have actually found it personally liberating, and that's what I want to pass on to other creative people who might be reticent or hesitant, or even commissioners or curators who have the space. Don't worry about what's going on. Just look at the space, look what you have to offer, and then realize it can make a massive difference to someone who hasn't been let into the door. But I found it so heartwarming just because it feels like with climate, because it affects the whole planet, the solution has to come from the whole planet. Right. So it is something which has to bring everyone together to find a real solution. It can't just be UK is climate, whatever it is, or Uganda is climate, whatever it is. It requires the whole planet. And I think that is the thing, when we finally realize power in numbers, this is something we care about. And we care about whether we've got a healthy planet, fresh air. And that's the power of where we can get to. And that's the hope and optimism, what we should be looking at. Right, beautiful. And so last thing, I can see Dan hovering outside, wanting to get back into his room. But I guess we sort of have this, again, this invitation to step into service on this podcast, becoming crew, like getting involved to bring life back, right? And
I just wondered whether there was an invitation or a provocation or an experiment that you might sort of invite listeners or whoever to play with, knowing what you know about the work you're doing and knowing what you know about where we've got to get to quite quickly. Is there anything you could leave listeners with? Just an invitation to sort of to step in and play.
Yeah, one thing which is, I always say, what's a low energy thing, a very easy thing to do. And I think one of the things which we've seen is if you are able to and you've got a bank account, try and move to a bank which doesn't invest in fossil fuels. And there are quite a few great banks out there that don't invest in fossil fuels. And that will make a big difference. And that won't change your day-to-day life. But that makes a massive, massive difference. So that's a really practical thing that you can do, because some things have to be quite easy to do. And then on the other hand,
something more courageous.
Something more courageous is, I would say, talk about these issues. So if you see people, investigate. So if you see an Insulate Britain, so when I did the and I'll keep this brief, but when I started the commission at the National Gallery, when we're talking about social housing, sustainable social housing, that was before the cost of living was just bubbling up and people having a go at the Insulate Britain people for being in the road. But then now look at the cost of fuel. Fossil fuels are genuinely like killing us, and we can't afford it. The cost is too much. So I would say really push, looking to see whether if there are...
Don't shoot the messenger.
Yeah, exactly. And then also look at these things and say, look, if there's green energy, can that actually help? And then if these things are happening, make noise about it. Talk about it around the kitchen table. If it's be intergenerational, talk to your kids, talk to your little nieces, cousins, or whatever. Talk about these things and to show them that actually there are loads of people in the older generation that care about it. Talk to see what's happening. And then you've got to push and stop voting for politicians who genuinely aren't going to help you on the cost of living. They're not going to help you, and they're not going to help you on the transition to get out of this hole. Look at what you loved, and to make sure, don't excuse these people. We can't have been in this mess for so long and then realize it will take a lot of effort. So support people. If someone's got a climate play or something like that, then maybe go and see the climate play. Don't go and see the Shakespeare thing, which has been seen a million times, and Shakespeare doesn't need the royalties. So,
yeah, right. Yeah, support the edges. Support
the edges. Yeah.
Love that. Ssega, thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you, Dan.
We could keep going. We'll do another one down the line. But and just quickly, I mean, I'll link to everything. But anything coming up that you want to pay attention to, or we should be? I mean, obviously there's the Philharmonia work and.
Yeah, I've got a performance with Philharmonia Royal Festival Hall in the Claw Ballroom on the 8th of June. So that's 8th of June. That'll be 2023, obviously. But then if not, then just, follow me on social media, at Love Ssega, LOVESSEGA, which will all be there. And support, just look at all your climate and green groups and just try and support everybody. It doesn't have to be 100%. Support whoever you can.
Yeah, I guess whoever you connect with, right? That's
100%.
Yeah, amazing.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ssega. Cheers.
If you've appreciated listening to this podcast, would you consider sharing it with a friend or leaving us a rating or review via your podcast provider? It helps more people to find us, and we'd be most grateful.
So I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Love Ssega. What a human, huh? Top crew on Spaceship Earth. If you did enjoy that, could you maybe potentially share it with someone, or give us a cheeky review, or give us a little bit of feedback, a bit of cheeky commentary on, mail us or drop us a message into Instagram? That would be marvellous. We're at thespaceship.earth, and also you could sign up for our newsletter, our writing, and our updates on all things Becoming Crew at becomingcrew.substack.com. It'd be lovely to hear from you. So I'm going to play out with a track by Love Ssega, of course. This is a song called Capes for Blue Skies. I'm pretty sure this is a riff on a Clean Air Future. which is from Ssega's collaboration with the Philharmonia Orchestra that he spoke to in the episode. I absolutely love this song. It's been stuck in my head for weeks. There's just so much kind of beauty in it. It's just a fascinating arrangement. And so I suggest you play it loud and play it often. So thanks for listening. Look after yourself out there, and make sure you are regularly entangling yourself with the More Than Human crew, our More Than Human family around you. Until next time, peace and out.
This podcast is created in service to life, for you. It takes time, funds and energy to make. If you'd like to contribute to the running costs, you can donate the price of a cuppa or a pint. Find the link on our website. This podcast wouldn't exist without the following crew: Charlie Shred, Audio Jedi; Seaman Home Burgess, Engine Room; Willow Burgess, Jingles;